more of that later in the show. But first, before we get to the rest of our agenda, let's go through some of the big stories with the leader of the Social Democratic Party, William Clouston. Afternoon, William.
Hi, Kevin.
First of all, we must be slightly careful here because, of course, this guy, Chris Cash, who's been arrested for allegedly spying for the Chinese in the heart of the Palace of Westminster. He had connections to Tom Tugendhat, but he's denying all wrongdoing, saying that he is a totally innocent man. But that notwithstanding, serious questions are being asked now at our Parliament about the vetting of the 3,000 or so people who work there. Do you feel, you must be in and around Westminster, do you feel it's too easy to get past, security-wise, to work in Westminster?
Well, certainly the number of people that have security passes to the House of Commons and Lords is huge, so it's a big job. Is it too... I don't know about that. I think one of the things we've got to be realistic about is that important and big states do engage in espionage and they do recruit agents. And we should be paying attention to it. Gawain Towler did a piece, I think, in The Critic about 6 months ago about an attempt to recruit him as an agent. It didn't work. But we should pay attention to it. But I think I'd like to broaden it. I don't think that our state is paying attention to the trade reliance we have on China and the broader quantum of investment that China's made in our industries and, say, our universities, for instance. Very interesting that Oxford and Cambridge have large investments from China, and it does clearly provide influence. Let me give you an example, Kevin. You remember a couple of years ago when Liverpool University decided to have a vote on getting rid of Gladstone Hall, named after the famous Liberal Prime Minister, and they replaced the name and decided to call it something else. Not a word was said about Liverpool University's investments in China, which are a political matter as well.
I mean, that's the point about China is, you know, every nation on the face, it's the second biggest economy in the world and growing fast. Every nation on the face of the planet has to in some way deal with this vast country.
Yes.
So you do have to shake hands with the devil and all of that. The problem is that basically China does just exactly what it wants to do. It couldn't care less what we think. It couldn't care less what we tell it. You know, Rishi Sunak, you know, giving press conference over at the G20 in Delhi. You know, I told that Li Keqiang exactly where to get off. You dare, you know, intrude on our democratic processes. How dare you? How dare you? They just go, yeah, so what? And we, you know, we'll also say, why don't you get to grips with the ecology? Why don't you do something about all the pollution you're spewing out? 28% of the world's carbon emissions come from China. Why don't you? Well, they don't do anything. I mean, there's not much we can do about it, is there?
Yeah, I do largely agree with you. I think the Chinese state is extremely single-minded. It runs a sort of mercantilist trade policy, which has been very, very successful. We have been basically asleep at the wheel. The people that have governed us have regarded our country as a shop. You only have to go. I think things are changing now. People like Ian Douglas Smith have raised it quite rightly, but the people that have been governing us for a long time have regarded us as a shop. You only have to go back to Cameron and Osborne, deliberately closing down British nuclear fuels. A couple of years later, going off to the Chinese, asking them to build our nuclear power stations. 5G, exactly the same. I did a speech in 2019, and I said any British government that wanted effectively the Chinese Communist Party to be in charge of 5G was insane. So I think we need to wake up. I think we've got a massive trade. I agree with you, Kevin. We've got to. The world has to deal with China. China is a potential force for good, I think, in the long run. But you've got to be very vigilant, and you cannot. You've got to run your society in your own society's interests and toughen up. I think we're governed by people that are used to a sort of come by our slightly unrealistic view of the world, and we need to wise up.
Absolutely, but it is a real imponderable problem because China knows where it sits in the firmament of global power. And basically it could not give a damn what we think about anything. particularly in terms of environmental policies, green policies, and in terms of spying on us, frankly. So it is a difficult situation, but something clearly needs to be done. Let's move on. Daniel Khalif, the former soldier suspected of spying for Iran, broke out of Wandsworth Prison, as we all know, last week. He was caught, I think, on Saturday after 75 hours at large, roared with laughter, pretended it wasn't him. To him, I mean, this is even more embarrassing than if he'd been broken out by the Iranians or had some great conspiracy of associates who were going to whisk him to freedom, fly him abroad. It's all the more embarrassing that he clearly did it for a laugh.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it, that he turned up in Chiswick, and he might as well have turned up in Ealing. Frankly, it was absurd. My friend Rod Little wrote about this in the Sunday Times yesterday, and he said, "Rest assured, there's the LGBT plus flag flying over Wandsworth Prison," and I think it is another example of where the state needs to urgently. These agencies need to stick to their core functions. And he shouldn't have been in that prison anyway. And as you said, you reported earlier, Kevin, they've moved out another 30 or so prisoners to a more appropriate place. But it's slack. And, if you're concerned with LGBT rights, good for you. But focus on checking people that come in and out. I think he did regard this as a joke. We'll wait and see. But this is a problem throughout our agencies. They don't focus on their core functions. Function of prisons lock people up, keep them safely behind bars and to protect the public.
Yeah, just to make sure people understand this, a lot of Labour politicians, Sadiq Khan foremost among them, saying this breakout is a direct result of Tory austerity. Well, prison cutbacks, all of that. Well, fair enough. There are only 70% staffed at Wandsworth. But no, this breakout was due to the fact that the two blokes on the gate didn't check this lorry driving out with a prisoner hanging beneath it. So that's what that is about. It's as simple as that. And as I said last week, while they moan about staff cuts, clearly they've got enough staff to put up an LGBTQ flag, but they haven't got enough staff to keep prisoners inside the walls of that jail. And quite what an LGBT flag is doing flying over a prison, I don't know. I mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And they're trying to sort of say, oh, welcome, gays as well. I mean, it's unbelievable. William, stay with us, William. We'll pick this up after this break. I'm talking to William Clouston, leader of the Social Democratic Party. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan. This is Talk TV, live from the Talk Radio studios. Welcome back. We're expecting a statement in the House of Commons from Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden on the alleged spy arrest in the House of Commons. We'll bring that to you live as soon as it happens. But in the meantime, I'm still talking to the leader of the Social Democratic Party, William Clouston. William, can we talk a little bit about the last night of the proms? It was invaded by manic Remainers. Apparently an organised sort of demonstration. I suppose they're free to do that if they must. So instead of the usual sea of Union Jacks as they broke into Land of Hope and Glory, we got a sea of yellow and blue EU flags, and they're all waving away. And I think we've got some video of it. Can we have a look at a bit of that? There they all are. I mean, it's quite a sight, isn't it? The BBC studiously focusing its cameras on the demonstrators, the protesters, the Remainers, because apparently there were quite a few Union Jacks in there, but the BBC didn't want us to see this. Outside the Royal Albert Hall, you had the EU Shuffle being danced by a bunch of sort of Morris dancers, all dressed up like EU fanatics. So, as I say, I suppose there they are. There's the Morris dancers. If you are one of these people, I suggest you recalibrate your value system in life, because you're really wasting your existence. You really are. But there they are. I mean, these people are welcome to their opinions. They're entitled to their opinions. They're entitled to demonstrate if you want to do this, I suppose. But does the BBC really have to get so enthusiastically behind them?
Well, they'd probably, they organised the event, but they would probably deny that they're responsible for the flags being there. And the people say that the people bring their own flags. They all look the same. And then some people say that they're given out free. I think, in truth, the Remain position, the position that these people represent, probably is the large majority position of classical music players, anyway, and listeners. It's arguable, anyway. The point is, in a free society, they have the right to do it. I think it makes a mockery of the event, and certainly that song at the end, it makes a mockery of. Frankly, I think the people that are doing it are making fools of themselves. It's slightly eccentric behaviour to turn up to the Royal Albert Hall with your flag and start, basically praising and flag waving on behalf of a large trade bloc, which is not very democratic. Anyway, I mean, they're going to do it. I don't see what we can do to stop them terribly, but it's one of these things that happens every year. And as I say, I think they're making fools of themselves. The BBC is probably in on it. Again, it sort of reflects the view within that organisation, doesn't it? I
think we can accept that the BBC is probably in on it, given that, was it 2 years ago, tried to ban the singing of Land of Hope and Glory altogether. What is wrong with the state broadcaster that it seems to detest this country so much? William, I want to just play you a little... what's your take on this, William? I mean, I thought his behaviour towards the Spanish captain, the lady captain, was inappropriate. You could say he'd had a couple of drinks and he was caught up in the moment. I mean, is he a victim of that inappropriate behaviour? Or is he a victim of the furore that followed?
I think it's a series of things, Kevin. I think it's a pretty sorry tale that says a lot about where we are in the West now. He should not have kissed Jenny Hermoso. She could not possibly have consented to it. So he made a mistake there. I think the sensible thing would have been to apologise and said, obviously in the exuberance of the time, he made a mistake. Had he done that, he may have still been in place. But yeah, it's sad because the media frenzy has taken focus away from an excellent tournament and an excellent... I mean, England did fantastically well. Olga Carmona's winner was an exceptional goal, I thought. And, we're not talking about the football, but it's the way things are in the West now, and we get into this moral panic. And as I say, I think he made mistakes from the start, and you apologise if you made a mistake. I think that's the right thing to do, and maybe he'd still be in position if he did. But these media frenzies are a feature, I think, of societies that are not entirely happy with themselves. I mean, the Ngozi Fulani thing. Remember of course, at the palace. Someone goes to the palace who is obviously against the royal family anyway. Shouldn't have been invited. An older lady asked her where she was from, and what do we get? We get a month's worth of frenzy, and that's not a healthy position. I mean, it's just it's not worth 4 weeks of media time, frankly. So I think the whole thing is sad. As I say, shouldn't have kissed her, should have apologised, and maybe he'd still be in position if he had.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. A quick sorry much earlier on. I mean, he clearly had a couple of drinks. He could have said that. Look, I got carried away. I was a bit skew-whiff. It would have been a lot better, but it's ended as it's ended. That interview, of course, tomorrow night, 8 o'clock on Talk TV, exclusive to Piers Morgan, so that's worth watching. Final question, I guess, William, the migrant crisis. We learned towards the end of last week, I think it was Friday, that something like 1,900 or over 1,800 migrants crossed the channel in illegal vessels that week. That was until Friday. Now we've learned that over this last weekend alone, 800 more have crossed the channel. Rishi, back in March, stopped the boats. This is a fiasco now, isn't it?
Total fiasco. And the people on our side, which is the majority of the British public, who are not asking for very much. Remember, Kevin, we're not asking for very much. We want a secure border. Any democracy is entitled to a secure border, and it's the most natural thing in the world for you to have the keys to your front door. And they've utterly failed. I think it's very, very serious. I think it goes deeper than the incompetence of the political class. The Labour would probably be worse on this. The Tories are a shambles. And the cost to our country in the future is just going to escalate. I would ask people now to just be aware of the fact that the lifetime cost per migrant arriving in an unsolicited way to European states can run into hundreds of thousands of pounds, possibly some estimates in Europe that have been done, pricing these illegal entries at sort of half a million per person, a lifetime cost of the public purse. It's an utter shambles. We know how to solve it, but we don't have a political class with the bottle to do so.
Yeah, Rishi's too busy over in Delhi rattling his sabre to an unimpressed Chinese Prime Minister. He really should get to grips with this. As you say, William, it's not just the cost of putting them in hotels, feeding them, and giving them 45 quid a week. We also give them hundreds of thousands of pounds each for their immigration lawyers so they can contest our bid to throw them out. Unbelievable. Great to talk to you, William. Thank you so much for your time. That was William Clouston, leader of the Social Democratic Party.